Today on the show, we are joined by Alisa Tazioli to talk about offer negotiation. Alisa is a managing director in the Seattle office of Major Lindsey in Africa. She leads in-house counsel searches for clients placing candidates in Fortune 500 publicly traded and privately held companies across a wide range of industries. This is The Career Queue, a podcast focused on helping you navigate the signals in your career to keep you growing and moving forward in business and in life. Here's today's host, Stacey Harris.
So welcome to the show, Alisa. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's great to be invited.
I appreciate you making the trek. Before we get into kind of the meat of what we're talking about today regarding the offer negotiation.
Sure. And became their recruiter for their in-house law department. And after a number of years, left there. And now I'm at an executive search firm that focuses on legal placement.
So you've actually kept that legal theme throughout your entire career.
Yeah. You know, I think intellectually there was just that spark when I was in college. At one time, I contemplated going to law school and didn't, and now I'm glad I did not. But wow. Yeah, you know, it's always sort of had some intellectual interest, and I think what I discovered through the process of working with legal professionals is that as difficult and demanding as they were, and believe me, I worked in settings where they were all difficult and demanding, they were also smart and passionate and engaged people and had a purpose in mind of what they did, and were involved in business in so many different ways that it fed both my intellectual curiosity about law generally, but allowed me to work with a group of really smart professional people. And that's held my interest. I can have very random interests sometimes, so it's held my interest.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm assuming that those relationships that you've built over those years and the experiences that you've had, and both the incredible and the challenging, have led you to a level of expertise when it comes to negotiation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And sitting in the recruiter chair, you're obviously the one that's, working with the hiring managers or the clients and developing the offer package.
Right.
But you've also had a lot of exposure, obviously, to the process in which candidates go through the offer evaluation process as well. Let's dive into the offers. But before we actually really, really dive in, I want to talk about, the offer is not just the dollars, right? We're talking about the deal, right? And you would never present it to the candidate as the deal, right?
Yeah.
You would say, well, you would probably say,
my deal lawyers relate to it being a deal.
Yeah. But
we'd
like to make you an offer,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
We'd like to make you a deal like double guns. I've got to use, Pontiac in the back. But that when you're presented with an offer, it's much more than the dollar sign that you see.
Yep.
So the definition of the offer is both the compensation as well as...
Yeah. So an employment offer really is when an offer is extended to a candidate. The role is already defined, typically, or at least has some basic parameters to it. And the components of an offer, the real essence of it is the compensation and benefits. And compensation it is the number, but it's the total number that ends up on your W-2. So it's a base salary. There's different components to compensation. So there's a base salary component. There can be a cash bonus, either a target, an annual target, or a rolling target. And depending on the company, sometimes if it's a publicly traded company, there might be an equity component, meaning stock options or restricted stock, some sort of future stake in the company's outcome. And those things are what total up on the spreadsheet to be a total dollar amount. Sometimes it's just salary. But the compensation piece is the number. It's cold, hard cash. The benefit piece, of course, also has intrinsic value, but the benefits are things like health and welfare benefits and paid time off and, maybe other perks like paid gym memberships or professional association dues, those kinds of things. So while those things may have $1 attached to them, they're typically a whole package of benefits that are offered to all employees by an employer, to all their employees, to all their full-time employees.
So they might be a little bit more on the softer side of the offer.
I don't know if I'd say softer side, but they just have a different kind of definition to the element. It can be things like contribution to a 401k or a pension plan. And some companies still have pension plans. Some companies still have both. So there are other things that provide a benefit to the employee. And those are things that are offered to all employees. Those tend to be the things, if we're talking about offer negotiations, and we'll, I'm sure, get into the negotiation detail, but those tend to be sort of more
non-negotiable.
Yeah, there's not a lot of variable in those things. And they're typically a standard thing that are created for all employees. So they're not something that is negotiated.
Not a lot of wiggle.
No, there's not a lot of wiggle there. There may
Yeah.
be little tweaks that you can make during the course of an offer negotiation, but you're not going to get, for example, a different health care package than what all the other employees get. The health care package that's offered to employees is what's offered to all
across
employees.
across the board.
That's just what it is.
Yeah.
So they don't tend to be things that are negotiated.
So let's talk about the numbers. Let's go to the total dollar value, right? Like the number on the spreadsheet. That includes compensation ranges as well. And my understanding is that it's not exclusive just to your base salary, right? There could be some flexibility, not only the base, but some of those other dollar values as well.
So employers have defined compensation ranges according to job families, and they define those things across the spectrum of their company in a way that is intended to compensate for similar levels of skill and experience, broadly. And then they define compensation ranges within those similar types of job families. So, for example, a marketing manager in a couple of different divisions within the company are probably all going to be compensated at a similar level because of the function and of the expertise and the level at which the person operates. And so that's how compensation ranges are defined within a company. Companies also benchmark to those job families across their industry and with other companies. So this is not antitrust collusion. There is a way that it's done properly. One company A does not call company B and say, "What do you pay?" and then pay the same thing. No, that's not how it works. But there are, there's consulting firms that run anonymous surveys or they participate in industry surveys to benchmark what compensation is at different job families. The firm that I'm at, we run a compensation survey, actually, and that's focused on in-house legal compensation. So we know and have an idea about compensation at similar ranges. And those ranges are intended to give the employer some flexibility for being able to reward their employees and also give them a compensation career path. So if you come in at a particular place in the range, you have the opportunity to be rewarded financially as an employee through annual raises and that kind of thing. You may move up within your in your career at an employer, and you may get raises, and you're probably still within certain benchmarked ranges for those similar types of jobs.
Like a band.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So like
a compensation band.
Yeah. Governments have these, right?
Yeah.
Different government bands.
What we're looking at is you get the offer, and it's not just looking at your base. It's looking at the other elements that either the company has placed a dollar value on, right, and they've indicated as a part of the offer conversation or the communication that it is equal to X, but that it is an opportunity for you to be able to understand the other benefits that are being provided that may not necessarily have a benefit but could be valuable to you as it comes to your health and your wellness and extracurricular activities and support from the company. So it's looking at the entire package.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the whole deal. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there will be instances where perhaps your base salary doesn't necessarily meet your expectations.
That can happen.
But there are other elements to the offer that may actually close that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and look, I think before an offer is made, before you get to the point of receiving an offer, you really should be having this conversation throughout the whole process with the employer and their representative, or whoever that might be, whether it's a third-party recruiter or an internal, could be the hiring manager or an internal recruiter. But you should be having these conversations pretty early on so that at the beginning of the process what the general range is, compensation ranges that they target. What are the different components to how they compensate? You want to be able to understand that before you start interviewing, before you start getting down the path. You want to avoid surprises when it comes to offer time.
And there are going to be elements that you aren't aware of because you won't know until you get behind that glass door.
Yeah, there are some things you just don't know how they work.
Yeah.
And those kinds of details do become clearer at offer time. You may not know how they may tell you that they have a 401k contribution, but you probably won't know or need to know the details of that until you get the offer. And then at that point, you're going to learn a little bit more information about, what is the percentage of contribution and when do you vest in it and those kinds of things. So sure, there's going to be details that you don't know about it until the offer.
Well, and so that leads into the next question of, as part of your homework, right? Learning as much as you possibly can, either beforehand or along the way. But it's also important to understand what your priorities are. Well,
yes. I mean, I think, as I just mentioned, I think you really have to sit down and think about this before you embark on a job search or before you start entertaining looking at other opportunities. You've got to do your own homework and your own introspection. And I think that there's a couple of different ways to do it. There's the external piece. First of all, there's understanding, okay, where am I at financially right now? What is my compensation? How am I compensated? What basis am I compensated on? Some people work on commission, some people work on salary. So just understanding what that is. And know, of course, you should know your own compensation, although be surprised how many people don't. But just sitting down, defining what's important to you. This is where it goes hand in hand with the job, too. And, what's your career goal? Why? What is even prompting you to look in the first place? You got to have that idea in your head before you start thinking about and really defining what is your value? What is your value to the marketplace? What is the value of what you do? What is driving you professionally? And what are you really looking for out of a new career opportunity? Is important for you to understand and think about and define for yourself. Are you looking for and some of these things, they don't sound like they necessarily relate to compensation, but they do, or they will. And when you start looking at opportunities. So if you're, have a position now, a management level position in a smaller company, do you want a director level position in a smaller company? So do you want a job with greater scope and greater authority or a higher level of authority, but you still like the small company environment? Or are you interested in going to a bigger company and a bigger environment where you may lateral in, if you will, at the same level, but you're going to increase your job scope, or you're going to increase your market knowledge, or you're going to move to a different type of industry and a bigger company, or making some changes in some way. It's going to broaden your horizon. You've got to define those things up front because those things are going to contribute to the compensation offer and the package that you're eventually going to be looking at and evaluating. And it's important for you to understand what your priorities are and then go out and do your homework and go, all right, I want to be a director level at a $2 billion publicly traded company. And my expertise is finance. So go out and start doing some homework about what your target is, understanding what those general ranges are. There's information
everywhere.
There's just everywhere,
Yeah.
right? So get on the Googles and get after it and figure that out and understand where those ranges are. Then you know where you are. You understand where you're trying to get. There's probably going to be some negotiation there, but what you're doing is setting a realistic expectation with yourself. I think too often people can enter the job market thinking, well, I'm not going to take a job unless I get 20% higher in compensation. And you know what? That's probably a fallacy. You're chasing something
a unicorn.
And for what purpose?
Right.
I mean, look, we all want to make as much money as we can. There's nothing wrong with that goal. But if you're not realistic entering into the whole process, you're going to be disappointed every step. And that is no way to negotiate a job. No way to negotiate an offer.
You've heard it here, folks.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Save yourself the heartache and set some expectations.
And the time, right? Because you want to make sure that you're putting your energy. Yeah.
Look, do the homework.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of writing it down. So, write down your priorities, what's important to you. Because then when it comes time when you might need to make a trade-off, you've defined what your priorities are. And that decision-making process is going to be easier. That you're going to be able to sit down and make an evaluation of, yeah, that's right, this is important to me. Or, well, I said this was important, but it's really not. I get this other thing that I hadn't really thought about. And maybe I'm willing to make that trade-off. If you do that homework up front, bonus,
you'll save yourself.
Set yourself up for success and minimize the opportunity for disappointment.
Yeah. On both sides.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the employer is also.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to get to the end of the process.
Agonizing process. Right. Oh, God. It's going to create anxiety.
Yeah.
It is. It's just a time of uncertainty. And, it just make it easy on yourself. Just makes it go so much better.
Okay. So ultimately, what I took from that is, even if the dollar amount or the package or the deal that you get, it meets what you thought was the priority, right? Or that you're like, yeah, sure, I just want to earn 20% more, right? And they deliver that to you.
Right.
But if the job or the employer is not meeting your value system, or if you're having to travel 80% of the time and you have young children at home, and what's the point? That dollar amount means nothing.
Yeah.
Or all the gym memberships in the world won't help in other areas that are important to you if you don't prioritize them above the gym membership. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So there's a couple of questions. I see this a lot in LinkedIn because it's you said it's agonizing. It can create a lot of anxiety. And one of the things that really creates a lot of anxiety is no one wants to talk about money, really. But when do you start talking about it?
Yeah.
Because I've been guilty of being in conversations, and I think the conversation's really gone great. And then all of a sudden, they're like, oh, so our range is X. And I'm like, that's not going to cover my mortgage, right?
Right.
The job is awesome.
Yeah.
But if I have to get 2 more jobs to cover the mortgage, that's probably not going to work for me. Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
It really bummed me out because it was actually a role that I really thought that I'd be able to make some significant impact in. And I didn't like being the person that said, I can't accept it because of the compensation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I knew that if I had kept going with the process, even if I had have accepted the job and said, oh, I'm just going to be one of those people that I don't do it for the money, I do it for the love.
Yeah.
I'd be like, I don't know how I'm going to pay the light bill.
Right.
Right. And that's not fun either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
everybody has their definition and their sort of defining points.
That tipping point.
What you can and can't do.
So,
for sure.
Question: when do you start talking about money?
Talking about it? When a client retains me, they retain me for a very specific need, and it is my job to go out and find and target and develop candidate interest of people that have that very specific profile and skill set. So I'm going out and reaching out to people in the market who I know can do the job. But my client also has a certain compensation range that they're dealing with. They have a target base salary range and sort of all the components that we've talked about. So I know I have an idea about what they're going to pay. I know where they are competitively in the market. But it's also my job to understand where candidates are competitively in the market. Because part of what I need to feed back to my client is what the market is saying about compensation. Their ranges I may view them as being high or low or whatever, but part of my responsibility is to be able to counsel them and make sure that they are going to get the level of talent that they want at the price point that they're going to
they're
the
willing
market
to pay,
in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And be able to attract as well, be able to attract the kind of people that they're looking for. So for me, that means, and I think that any third-party recruiter like myself probably approaches it this way. This wasn't very different when I was in-house at a company as well. It's one of the first things I ask a prospective candidate. Before I even qualify them necessarily on skills, I may know enough about their background. If I've got you on the phone, you're interesting enough for me to talk to. I may disqualify you for other reasons, but I'm going to want to have that money conversation right away. And as a candidate, you should want to have it right away too. Because this is a little bit part of your homework. Mm-hmm. This is an opportunity for you to not only share where you're at compensation-wise, but to get that information of what the employer is targeting for the job. Mm-hmm. So you can understand you're now having a conversation where it's an exchange of setting expectations. The recruiter is setting an expectation with you about where they're going to compensate, and you're, sort of checking the expectation that you have as well about, and gaining an understanding from the employer about what their compensation is. So who goes first? This is I'll show you mine if you show me yours conversation. This is what this is. And as the candidate, you probably don't have a lot of leverage in this situation. I will say this. I think that is entirely okay, because this is also an opportunity for you as a candidate to sort of understand where the employer is at compensation-wise, but also to fairly talk about what your expectations are, and for you to sort of show that you've got some flexibility. So when you are asked we're going to assume for the purpose of this conversation that the recruiter and the employer is going to ask you first, tell me about your current compensation package and structure. And then I think you do that. You jump in and say, my current compensation is, I earn a base salary of $125,000 a year. I have a potential for a cash bonus at 15%, and I work for a privately held company and therefore don't receive any equity. What I am looking for, and this should just come right on the heels of what you just said to the employer, is what I am looking for. If you're asking about my expectations, what I am looking for is to be fairly compensated for the role and the scope of the job and the role that you're looking to fill. Tell me how your compensation is structured and what range are you anticipating.
Okay, that's a great way to put it. Right? Because you just don't put a period on the end of,
you just don't
this
put
is how
a
much
period
I earn,
on
right?
it. You might be working for a company. And look, HR people are used to this. We know that companies compensate very differently. There are some companies that are huge on their equity and very conservative on cash compensation. You find that especially in the startup culture and in the technology sector. There are some companies much more established, big, public companies where it's a little bit more balanced. And, there are some, because of their industry, that operate on a pretty narrow profit margin, and therefore the salaries tend to not be as high in those industries. Retail, airlines, those people operate on super thin profit margins. So their compensation packages aren't necessarily as rich or at the same range as other types of industries. If you've done your homework before you have this conversation, you know that. And if you don't, then you might learn that as part of the conversation that you're just about to have with this recruiter. But that's where you have it. You have it at the outset. And if you're not asked, I think you should be prepared you should always be prepared to be asked. I think the danger as well in refusing to disclose it, and I sometimes talk to candidates who will say, well, I really don't want to talk about compensation until we get to that point. You know what? You are letting the employer wonder. If you're undercompensated, then you probably have an idea about how much more that you should be making. That may or may not comport with what the employer is thinking. If you're compensated differently, say if your base salary is higher, but there's some other component that's lower, like their cash bonus opportunity or an equity component, you're not giving the employer an opportunity to address that if they decide that they want you, which is what they want when they make you an offer. They want you. So you haven't given them any information in which to address a gap or overcome something that they may genuinely want to do. But if they don't know that, it's not going to be part of their offer.
So there's
and
a
you
risk.
Just start, it's a huge risk.
Yep.
And you've just gotten the offer negotiation off to a bad foot. There is much less risk in disclosing the information than there is in playing hide the ball up front. Because if you're not willing to disclose that, if you're not willing to be transparent about this is a basic element, then what else are you? You're going to start to get this reputation of being a little bit cagey. And when it comes time to negotiating the offer, boy, the last thing you want to do is develop a bad taste in somebody's mouth because it just won't go your way.
Yeah.
Don't damage your reputation early. Be cooperative.
Yeah. Well, and if the question is being asked,
be transparent. You have nothing to lose by being transparent.
Yeah.
You really don't. I think the fear by a lot of candidates is that they say, well, they just want to know how cheaply they can get me. No, really. No, they don't. When they ask that question, they've got a range in mind. And they want to know if they're realistic within it. So, then if they come back and say, gosh, I'm not sure we're within your range, you can say, look, I'm interested in the opportunity because of these reasons. And if they give you a range, you can start making that decision right up front if you're willing to make that trade-off.
Right.
And if they're wildly under what you're making, then no, you've got to be able to say, you know what, maybe this isn't the right match.
Right. Yeah.
And, otherwise, if it's in the ballpark, good.
Yeah. Keep
That's
the
all you have to do.
conversation.
Yeah, that's all you have to do. You don't have to commit to anything.
Yeah.
You just have to say, great, that's within the range of what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where you just kind of like you get this uncomfortable feeling in your stomach, but if you're not looking out for yourself, and if you're not willing to kind of open up the dialogue between a potential future partnership, right? Like you can't be expected that you're going to get the outcome that you feel like you deserve. So that's great. Okay, so let's talk about the evaluation of the package, right? So I know you've got a couple of tips, and we'll actually get into the do's and don'ts here in a minute, but let's talk about kind of the approach to evaluating an offer. And the best time to consider the broad kind of evaluation of an offer is not when you've received it and you have to make it, think about what it is that are doing your homework. Right? Yeah. If you've done your homework, your evaluation of the offer when you have it in hand is actually going to go a lot easier or smoother for you. Yeah. But let's talk about in the scenario that someone has the offer in hand. Let's talk about what they do.
What do you do?
Yeah.
So you get an offer or you're getting an offer. You're on the phone and the hiring manager, the recruiter is saying, we're so excited. We're extending you this offer. I'd like to walk you through the terms. The first thing that you do is say, this is great. I'm so excited to be getting this offer. You want to be positive and acknowledge and be grateful for getting the offer. Even if you decide to turn it down, say thank you. Because it will start the conversation on absolutely the high note and the right foot. And the employer and that hiring manager is going to be excited. Making an offer is a fun thing to do.
Yeah. It's a gift.
It is. This is one of the most fun parts of the job for recruiters is making an offer. So, just acknowledge it that, hey, that's great. I'm really glad to be getting this offer. Great. Thank you. And then you'll have a conversation about the specifics of the components. So understand then, what are the components of the offer? What's the compensation? What does the benefits package look like? What are the basics of the compensation? The things that we talked about up front. Base salary. Is there cash bonus potential? Is there some sort of equity component?
Vacation, health benefits.
Yeah, then the benefits. People usually when an offer is extended, employers will often highlight the key areas of benefits, and that typically includes a description of their paid time off policy. So they may say either verbally or in an offer letter what their paid time off policy is in terms of healthcare, vision, dental benefits. What are those? How are they covered? Are premium expenses covered? Is it a high deductible plan? Is there, if it's a high deductible plan, is there a dependent care or healthcare savings account opportunity? Is there, if it's a publicly traded company, there might be an employee stock purchase plan that allows you to purchase stock at a discounted rate. It's kind of like a savings program. So really understanding all the different components of the benefits that are offered. It's going to come out in the offer package or in a rollout of the offer. I think here then is also the opportunity for you to understand, and I think there's a way to ask, you want to get through that whole conversation, right? So while the person is making the offer, acknowledge, but don't interrupt this is not the time to ask questions, and this is not the time to negotiate. You want to understand and get all the details of that offer before you start asking questions. I think it's appropriate at this point to ask clarifying questions. So because you may be getting this verbally, so will I be getting a written, follow-up written offer letter? Some employers will do that right away. Some won't do it until after you've accepted, but it's fair to ask, when will you be getting it in writing? I think it's also fair to ask as well questions that you may have about some of those specific components. And I would ask them really in the order in which it was rolled out. So how is the compensation paid? Are your employees paid monthly or weekly? What is the criteria for receiving a cash bonus? Is it company financial performance? Is it a personal performance metric? Can you tell me a little bit more about how that's determined?
So have a notepad handy.
Yeah, have a notepad handy. Yep. You should have a pretty good idea that the offer is coming. So hopefully you've thought about these things before you're having this conversation. But ask questions that just help you clarify and understand the components a little bit. And I think that you'll find by virtue of asking those questions, you're probably going to detect by the answers, be a good listener, and detect by the answers, you'll get some idea about sort of what may or may not be negotiable.
Okay. Yeah.
I think some of this is nuanced. You can always ask, but I think that there's something to be gained by really smart listening and making sure that you understand and see how the person reacts. Sometimes the recruiter will tell you up front whether or not something is negotiable. Or they may well ask you your response. What does this sound like to you? I think it's great to say, this is reasonably within the expectation of what I expected to see. I'd like the opportunity to think about it. Can I give you an answer tomorrow?
Okay.
You should I think it's entirely okay to ask for some time.
And so what would an appropriate...
But not much.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the appropriate timeline? Like, if you need to engage with family members, right, and discuss it with them, if you have a spouse or children that would be...
I think you should. I mean, you're going to... Look, you're probably going to want to do a gut check, if nothing else. You'd be amazed at the number of people, entirely accomplished and respected adults, who tell me, honestly, I need to call my mother. I mean, I've had people say this to me. I've had general counsels of publicly traded companies tell me, look, my mom knows all about this, and she's a financial wizard in our family, and I've got to have a conversation with her. Can I call you in the morning? Yes, of course you can. Usually offers need to be socialized at home. And if you're not married, then that's fine too. Or unless if you don't have other people depending on you, or having this conversation at home with immediate family members, you should sit down and evaluate it anyway.
Yep.
So yes, you should ask for some time. But you got to make it quick.
Yeah.
By the time an offer is extended, that employer, they want you. They know they want you. They definitely want a seat in that chair. Mm-hmm. They've probably been living without somebody doing the job, and they're ready to wrap it up. Plus, momentum is on your side. If you can evaluate the offer quickly and get back to them quickly, they're going to love that for you. And that shows some enthusiasm and really a note of positivity. So if you communicate that you'd like 24 hours to get back to them, you're going to get yes. You're probably going to get yes.
Well, and if you need a little bit longer, say you get an offer on a Thursday and you need until Monday because you'd like the weekend.
Yeah.
As long as you're open and transparent about that.
Yeah. I think be open and transparent, and also just be reasonable.
Yeah.
Recognize that this is a business issue for them, and they've got a business to run. Mm-hmm. It's not personal for them. It's not personal for you. Sure, you've got some personal things to take into account, but you really want to keep this factual and not focus on sort of the personal side. So, if you need the weekend, that's okay. I will say this too. I think, maybe this is my own bias. I expect. To me, offers that are pretty straightforward, you probably don't need 4 days or 5 days to think about it. If it's a really big offer, if you're a high-level executive, there's a lot of components to it, multiple types of stock that are going to vest over different periods of time. There's some complex components to it. Then maybe 4 days is okay.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 days is okay.
Yeah.
But just, be as prompt as you can.
Mm-hmm. And setting expectations.
And yes. And do that before you get off the phone.
Yeah.
Say, great, can I call you back tomorrow at, 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yeah.
I'd like overnight to think about it.
Yeah. That's great.
When is a good time for me to call you?
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, this next part I'm actually really looking forward to. This is when we come back from the break, I want to talk about the negotiation do's and don'ts, right?
Yeah.
I think this one. Now, I think in some instance we may assume that a lot of these are just common sense. But what we know about common sense is that it's not actually common.
That's right. That's right.
So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get into the do's and don'ts.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes at thecareerq.com, where you can also subscribe to the podcast and sign up for our newsletter.
So welcome back. We are sitting here today with Alisa Tazioli, and we're talking about negotiating the offer. So you had a lot of great things to say about kind of the evaluation and doing your homework and all those kinds of things. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the negotiating do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
So let's kick off with the do's.
Yeah.
So what do you say?
Yeah. So I think on the list of do's, as I mentioned before, look, I think you set yourself up from the beginning. When you get the offer, stay positive, be enthusiastic, have a tone that really is welcoming to the employer and shows that you're enthusiastic about the opportunity. Even if you eventually turn it down, it's really a good idea to be positive throughout the whole process, but especially during the offer negotiation. I think, too, remember that an offer is a give and take situation. And yes, it's a negotiation, but what you want to negotiate to is a win-win. You're not trying to come out. You want both parties. You want to feel good, and believe me, that employer wants to feel good. And that is the best possible outcome for both parties to feel good. You're going to be setting yourself up great just walking in the door on day one. So always negotiate to obtain a win-win outcome. I think that's super important. Be responsive, timely, professional. This is all part of being positive, but really keeping that momentum going. It's going to do a lot for you in the offer negotiation process. If you do start negotiating something, the fact that you're being responsive and timely, just having that positive edge and that note of enthusiasm and sincere interest is going to go a long way. It will cause the employer to want to go the extra mile for you. They're already excited about you because they're making you the offer. So keep that momentum going. Yeah. I think, too, do evaluate the total offer before you respond or start to negotiate. So,
see, I think that's key, right?
Yeah.
Like the total offer.
Yeah, it can be so easy to want to to want to jump in and negotiate those terms right away. But really wait until you've evaluated the whole thing, because you're going to be able to compare and contrast what was important to you. Is this within your expectation? Is it important for you to get a little bit more on base salary, or, are you really after a little bit more stock? So understanding the whole package before you start to negotiate. And I think that this comes with, one of the other do's, which is to really prioritize your top concerns and your top needs. What is it? What is it that's really important to you? And, I would say you should always be looking for long-term value. I think negotiating on the equity component, if it's offered to you, is probably the smarter thing to do. But just, really understand what your top concerns are.
Yeah.
And prioritize those. If you've got your priorities in front of you when you get an offer, now you know exactly what you're going to need to negotiate to.
Well, and you're able to keep it factual, right? And not emotional.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the don'ts.
Yeah.
So speaking of emotional.
Don't be emotional. Don't take it personally. Like, don't be emotional. Keep it factual. So I find that people that get emotional in an offer negotiation end up taking the conversation in some weird way that I just can't do anything about, Oh, well, my wife is going to kill me unless I get a signing bonus. I'm not here to solve your marital problem. If the signing bonus is important because you are walking away from when your bonus is going to be paid before you join the company, then tell me that.
Right.
And that puts the factual part in it and takes the emotional part out. Those two things can be the exact same dollar amount, but really just don't saddle the negotiation with your emotions or being demanding or egotistical. See how this don't list can get long in a hurry. Being egotistical in a negotiation is just, it's going to kill the deal faster than anything else you can do.
And in some instances, you become your worst enemy at that point.
Yeah, and look, you want to avoid these don'ts like the plague, because a company, an employer, when they extend an offer, they can just as easily turn around and yank it out from under you. And they don't have to give you a reason. Believe me, they're probably going to have a good one if that happens. But they can yank an offer for not liking your tone. And that has a way of sort of extending into how they think about you as a candidate and how they think about your fit with the company. So don't give people a reason to do it. So, really just keep your ego out of it. Keep it in check. Don't overdo it. Oh my gosh, I have seen people do some really strange things. And by overdoing it, sort of short story, I was privy to, this was not something that actually happened to me, but a colleague. I have seen candidates just come back with, want to negotiate their offer and come back with really elaborate spreadsheets. There's this I'll never forget someone that came back with a PowerPoint that was 8 pages. This is not rocket science. We are not solving how to get to the moon. This is an offer. Now, yes, it's important, but wow, all that back analysis and all the whys and the putting. This took an enormous amount of time. I don't care how quick you are with PowerPoint, but it was completely overdone. And the employer freaked out. They just went, what is this person doing? Just a huge turnoff. And this is not an offer negotiation that ended up going well. So don't overdo it. If you think you're trying to do something trite or cute, don't. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Well, and it sends a signal to the employer about, if there are other parts that require negotiation once you're a part of the company, you're setting the benchmark, basically, of how your approach will be moving forward, not only with management, but with also your peers.
Right. Because you negotiate things in the workplace every day.
Yeah.
And if part of your job is negotiating on behalf of the company, they're going to look at this and say, "Oh, whoa, we have just made a big mistake."
Right.
So don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Just don't do it. Just don't do it. You're not showing how tough you can be. You're showing how sort of emotionally unintelligent you are by doing this. So just don't do it. Don't start negotiating the offer in the same phone call that you received the offer. Look, you may be able to do your analysis and call back that recruiter in an hour. That's fine. But don't do it on the fly. You got to give yourself at least a few minutes to absorb it all, understand it all. And then if you're going to negotiate, then come back and negotiate in the subsequent call. Don't negotiate piecemeal. So when you're going to negotiate an offer that's been extended to you, when you go into that negotiation conversation, don't say, well, I want to talk to you about the base salary. Can I get 5% higher? Oh, okay, great. I can? Fabulous. Okay, now I'd like to talk to you about, no, put it all out there at one time. Because otherwise you're going to be looking like someone that negotiates with death by 1,000 cuts. And he's just going to wear out really be nice. You can do yourself so many favors by really just approaching this in a systematic and intelligent way. It shows that you're thoughtful about it.
Right. Well, really. The offer was presented to you as a package.
The offer was presented to you as a package, negotiated as a package.
Right.
And you can say up front, I have questions about a couple of things I'd like to talk to you about the stock component and the paid time off. Just say up front what you want to talk about. And then go through those elements one by one. That's fine.
Right.
But don't come running at them and want to negotiate every single piece.
Right.
Prioritize it. You want 10 things you want to negotiate? No. You're going to pick 2. And those are the things that you're going to go for. So if you've done your dues and set your own expectations and understood your priorities, then you're going to be able to come back to them with a couple of things, but negotiate the whole package, not just one little piece here and there.
Onesie-twosies,
yeah. Don't do it in onesie-twosies.
Okay.
Don't take a counteroffer from your current employer.
Okay, so explain this.
This always ends up being a bad bargain. So if you are smart and have done your homework up front and you are out there interviewing, you know why you want to leave your current company. No matter what the reason is, you know why. It's a career move. It's money. It's something. But there's something that's motivating you, and you should understand it and be committed to that long before you get an offer. Now, going in and giving notice, if you're really good, or maybe you serve a niche, and that employer is all of a sudden realizes that they're going to have to live without you. You may have a boss that says, "Oh my gosh, you've been such a valued employee. We don't want you to leave. What will it take to make you stay?" Avoid the temptation to put a dollar figure on that or to do it. There's a number of reasons that you shouldn't. One, chances are really, really high that all those reasons that you thought about looking in the first place, none of that's going to change. The reality is that they're trying to save their own bacon and save themselves some money. So, if they do offer you more money, you're going to start to think about, well, wait a minute, why wasn't that there before?
Right.
Wait a minute, all these other reasons, even if it was just one or two reasons, those things are likely still going to exist. And there's been a lot of research about this, and I think recruiters will point to this easily, but the chances are if you take a counteroffer from your current employer, something like over 90% of the people who do that are gone in a year anyway.
So it's just a matter of time. You're just prolonging it.
You're prolonging the agony here. Counteroffers are a bad bargain. Don't succumb to it.
Okay.
Just don't do it.
Yep.
Just don't do it.
Okay. Maybe underline that one in your notes, folks, because, you may be in the situation where it's unexpected.
Yeah.
Right, and you may not be prepared for it.
Yeah.
So definitely take it into consideration.
There are very rare circumstances when this works, and I've seen a few of them, but they're really rare. If all of a sudden there's a promotion in the offing, oh well, we were going to make you a VP. Really? Okay. How long has that been in the works? Oh, hopefully you have some clue that's been going on. Sometimes employers may not realize that you're out there looking, which, if you were smart and circumspect about it, then they probably don't know. So sure, can things be going on behind the scene at your current employer that you didn't know about that's going to put you in a better position if you stay there? It's possible. That is so rare.
Yeah.
It is so rare. And if it happens when you give notice, then you really have to wonder if there's any thought gone into it all. Chances are you're going to be gone anyway.
Yep.
Something's not going to transpire, and
Save yourself.
You're going to be miserable.
Yep.
Don't take the counteroffer from the current employer.
Okay. So what do we do if it's a good offer?
If it's a great offer, you should take it. You don't. Here's the irony about offer negotiations: you don't have to negotiate.
Right.
If you've done this homework beforehand and you know what you want, you've defined your priorities, you've done your homework, you've sold yourself properly, there's a great match with the employer, you really bring something of value to them. They've recognized that by bringing you a good, strong offer to the table. And if it's what you want, do not feel compelled to ask for more. You've evaluated it. If it's a great offer, take it.
Do you take it in the same phone call?
Sometimes people do this. And I think you can. I think you can, and I think you don't lose anything by doing it. But if you do, I want to know that you've thought about it, that you have been thinking about it all the way.
Through the process.
Through the process. It's certainly entirely appropriate if you've had candid conversations with that employer or the recruiter, and so you have a really good idea that both an offer is coming and what that range is and what the likely package is going to entail. If it's been previewed to you, perhaps even, then and it's a great offer, then you should take it.
Yeah.
Take it.
Well, and similar to having to evaluate because maybe it's not as strong as you thought were hoping for, give yourself the opportunity to take a deep breath, right? And call back in an hour or call back the next morning or, the likelihood of someone or an employer reneging because you haven't, given an answer within 8 business hours, you probably don't want to work for someone like that anyway, right? But don't do your happy dance once you get off the phone if you feel like it's exactly what you expected. Yeah, that's great.
Take it. If it's a great offer, you should take it. Some employers will sometimes comment at the offer process by laying out their highest and best. They expect, they may fully understand and appreciate that you're a competitive candidate and it's a competitive marketplace. And they're not going to try and nickel and dime you.
Right.
They just don't.
Want you.
They want you. They want your expertise. They've got a job that needs to be done.
Yep.
They're offering you the job because you bring value to them. They're excited about it. They're going to put something together that's going to be compelling for you. If you shared your compensation with them up front and had this expectation conversation, they're going to be in a position to make you a great offer, to be attractive.
Yep.
They want to attract you. They want you to say yes. If they make a great offer, take it. Enthusiastically.
We'll put a period on that. Just take it.
Just take it.
Just take it. Just do it.
Just do it.
Great offer. Just take it.
Just take it.
Oh, totally. We're going to trademark that. Just take it.
Just take it.
Make a stamp. Just take it. Okay. So let's get into the standard questions that we ask each guest. This has been a great conversation. And we'll actually have great show notes from Alisa's interview at thecareerq.com, including your contact information.
Sure.
So we want to be able to share your wealth of information with folks. So
it's out there.
They'll be able to find you. But let's get into a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
What was your first job, and what were the fundamentals you developed there that you still apply today?
This was in the days of the telegraph. So my first job was working as a receptionist and photographer's assistants at a photo studio.
Oh, nice.
That did family, individual, and children's portraits. What did I learn at that job so many years ago? I think I learned a couple of things. One, I learned patience when you're dealing with the public, and especially people that have young children coming in to have their pictures taken. They may not always want to be there. At least the little kids don't. You get people as they are when they walk in the door. And there are so many different kinds of people that you deal with in the course of in the course of a job when you're serving the public. So, be patient and be attentive, and show a little empathy and understanding. It will go a long way to making your job better, as well as what the person is there for.
Well, and that definitely applies to what you're doing today, right? You're working with people that are making a big decision about one aspect of life, but they're actually bringing in through the door with them the other parts of their lives too.
Look, as a recruiter, you are dealing with a whole person every day.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm talking to people about their careers. I'm talking to companies about shaping their legal function, and their how they can serve their clients and mitigate risks, and talk about all sorts of things. But in the course of recruiting, you're dealing with a whole person and their whole life, and making a career change is a big decision, and it impacts everybody. It impacts that person's family. It impacts their off work hours, and who we are as professionals. You're more than your resume.
Yep.
You bring the whole person to work.
Yep. Yep.
And what you do professionally gives people career satisfaction. So, it's you're dealing with the whole person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
With people, not robots.
Although I'm like, oh wait, there are more automated kind of systems that are happening around me.
Yeah.
Have I gotten to that life stage? Okay, so what have you read, listened to, or watched lately that you'd recommend?
So I'm a voracious reader. I really, I read to relax and to be entertained and to learn something. And so I enjoy reading a lot. I think, and I routinely have something on my nightstand, so I'm always reading something. I think the one thing that I have read over the last couple of years that I would wholeheartedly recommend to a lot of people, and something that I read really at a time in my life that just reverberated very strongly with me, is this tremendous book. It's called The Road to Character. It's written by an author by the name of David Brooks. He has authored a number of books. He's also a columnist for the New York Times and a commentator on PBS, as well as other. He does political commentary, but also, sort of a social scientist essentially, and has written books before. And the Road to Character, the sort of the tenet and the thesis of The Road to Character is that people are much more conscious and aware of how to develop themselves professionally and develop we have a much clearer sense of how to develop our own resumes than we do than we are clear on how to build our inner selves. And our own personal center, if you will. And this book is an exploration of that, sort of the inherent conflict that we all have within ourselves between, our external and internal self, if you will, sort of being the person who lives up to their resume and resume virtues, or are you the person that can live up to your eulogy and those eulogy virtues? Are you kind? Are you capable of great love? Are you generous? And this book examines that by weaving in and examining stories of a couple people in history that have demonstrated sort of how they developed and exhibited character. I found it intensely personal, but really just so it's thought provoking, and I think the world of it.
Oh, great! Well, we'll definitely have that listed in the book club.
Yeah,
we have a list of books that our guests recommend, and that sounds incredible.
Yeah, and he's I think he's a brilliant writer. He's done some TED Talks on the topic. Some of his column pieces have touched on some of the themes from the book as well. It was published, I want to say, in 2015. I think in 2015. I think that's right. Great book.
Okay, great.
Highly recommend.
All right, so you're sitting across the table and having a glass of wine with 90-year-old Alisa. What do you think she'd say to you today?
You didn't use all your moisturizer.
I have to say, we haven't heard that one yet.
What would I say to my 90-year-old self?
No, what would your 90-year-old self say to you?
Say to me. I think she would say. Be fearless. Don't get caught up in your inner demons. Let those insecurities break through those. You'll live a happy life if you can do that.
Yeah, that's great.
So, do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be fearless.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Alyssa, this has been awesome. It's always fun to talk to you.
It's
and
fun.
I love the fact that it's recorded and that people are getting insight into what it means when we get together.
Well, look, it's a pleasure to be invited. I'm glad that you find my insights, or I hope people find my insights at least somewhat helpful. And if it's been nothing more than amusing, then that's okay too.
Well, personally,
it's been fun for
we
me.
need you back because of the wealth of information that you have, and this is really just scratching the surface. And this is not only, the purpose of this is about career strategy and development, but there's so many personal aspects to it too, right? So let's continue the conversation and have you back really soon, and
we'll do it.
We'll share a little bit more. So thanks again for coming back. Check us out on thecareerq.com, and we will chat with you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to thecareerq.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles to today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again.
The Career Q podcast is produced by Lens Group Media and recorded at Jack Straw Cultural Center in the lovely Seattle, Washington.
Oh, well, my wife is going to kill me unless I get a signing bonus.